Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast Weekly Preview Edition. I am your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, and back to join me once again, Kate, the great Magdziuk. Kate, how are you as we head into Week 11 here?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk some more football. We finally have some of our main fantasy assets back. We've got like the Chiefs back. We've got the Eagles back, the Dolphins. Devon A. Chain might be returning this week. Like, we're in a good spot for fantasy this week. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited, and I'm wired. And we've got even a solid Thursday night football matchup to talk about. So I'm pretty amped this week. How about yourself?
Yeah, feeling pretty good about this week's slate of game. There should be some fun ones. We got some nice divisional matchups. Like you said, the Thursday night game, finally something good there. And Monday night should be really fun as well. So I'll be excited to get into this here. And like we always do, we're going to go game by game. We'll hit on our key players and matchups and lineup decisions as we go. No Atlanta, no Indianapolis, no New England, no New Orleans this week. So we got 14 games to go through. We're going to get into it here. But before we do, I do have to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. Fall is all about the back to school and back to routine checklist. And the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future, starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it quick, easy, and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, meetfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Kate, let's get it going here and start with, again, like you said, one of our best Thursday night football matchups, at least on paper.
Which means it's going to be absolutely disgusting, by the way.
It'd be so sad if it sucks.
That's the rule.
Because, it feels like a very long time since we had a nice matchup like this. Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. I'll let you kick us off. Where do you want to start with this game?
Let's talk about the Bengals offense, who's like kind of in an interesting position, right? Because the Bengals are finally sort of getting back on track offensively. Joe Burrow looking healthy, obviously couldn't pull through the win last week without wide receiver T. Higgins again this week. So you're starting Joe Burrow, but the Ravens allowing the fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this year. You're starting Jamar Chase, but the Ravens are allowing the, fifth fewest fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Outside of these two guys, like you're starting, Joe Mixon, but that's not a great matchup either. You're starting these guys, but I think the biggest question people are going to have about this Bengals offense is, with the absence of T. Higgins, is there anybody else that we can thrust into our lineups, or is this a no-go situation given the fact that this is a Ravens defense that won't allow much of anything up against this team?
Yeah, I have like traumatic stress from watching the Bengals against the Ravens. Like for fantasy purposes, it keeps like hurting me in like crucial matchups. So I'm avoiding these guys for the most part. Like Tyler Boyd lining up obviously in the slot, going up against Kyle Hamilton this week. I know Nick Bodiford wrote about him in the wide receiver cornerback matchup in players to avoid this week. So I don't love Tyler Boyd this week. Hamilton has a 77.2 coverage grade. He's been really good, and he has been playing in the slot as of lately. And then Trenton Irwin was the other option. He got the touchdown last week as well, but Baltimore, again, they're one of those man heavy defenses. Irwin really hasn't delivered at all against man coverage this year. 0.13 fantasy points per route run against man, which is 97th. And then a 53.7 receiving grade versus man isn't overly encouraging either. So I think I'm with you. I think it's Jamar Chase, it's Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon, and then you just got to hope that these guys are able to deliver. But it's going to be, I think, a difficult matchup here against Baltimore.
Yeah, the Bengals defense, on the other side of the ball, not the shabbiest of matchups for the Baltimore Ravens. So we've seen some flux for quarterback Lamar Jackson. Had a few down weeks now. Is this the week where he bounces back? The Bengals are allowing the 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. I like Lamar Jackson. I think this could be a tighter game that's maybe not going to lend itself quite as much to the run. The Bengals are allowing this a league high 16% explosive pass percentage. Could be an interesting spot for Zay Flowers, allowing the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends this season. Hello, Mark Andrews. Like, again, I don't know that there are a ton of questions here regarding the Ravens offense, except maybe what to make of this run game, because it's been kind of a hodgepodge. You've got Keaton Mitchell with the breakout, the rookie, and then you've got Gus Edwards. You got a little bit of Justice Hill. Where do your faith lie? What's your confidence level in? I think Keaton Mitchell probably in particular is the most questionable for me headed into this matchup.
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell, I'm still not quite there yet, like to plug him into lineups where I have other options, right? Like deeper leagues, you're putting him in, you've been happy with what he's doing, but like 22% snap share last week, which was up from, I guess, 17% the week before. But again, like just 15% of the rush attempts, there's no goal line work there. He did break off a long touchdown. If those snaps don't like increase, which I feel like I'd feel better just kind of waiting to see those snaps increase than kind of hoping that he breaks off another big score, like big run here for a score. And so I'm Keaton Mitchell, even Gus Edwards, like these guys are more like RB3 for me. So those kinds of leagues where you do have to start 3 running backs, or you got limited options in your flex spot, like that's where I feel better about this Ravens backfield. Probably slightly I feel a bit better about Gus Edwards just because he is getting that goal line work, and that's kind of what's hurt Lamar Jackson a little bit too. He hasn't been getting the touchdowns as much over the last 3 weeks or so. But yeah, I'm not ready to jump in on Keaton Mitchell just yet. And we said it last week too, and of course he broke off a nice touchdown there, but I'm not banking on that every week unless those snaps kind of come up a bit for him.
Yeah, that'll be sort of the interesting thing. We saw John Harbaugh come out and say, like he likes Keaton Mitchell. It sounds like they might want to get him a little bit more in the offense. It didn't necessarily translate to many more touches last week. It didn't necessarily translate to a significant increase in snaps. Like there was no telling on the field that this is his role to be taking. Gus Edwards, saw a bounce back in his workload. I'm trusting Gus Edwards the most out of these 3, but Keaton Mitchell, given the explosive play ability, and the Bengals have been a matchup that have allowed some explosive runs so far this season, I think there could be a little bit of wiggle room, but definitely going to be one of those volatile assets. I think that's about it for this Thursday night matchup, though it's going to be a juicy one. I think it's kind of a tenuous one. Like outside of the main guys, there's not a whole lot to like about the secondary and tertiary assets in this game.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I think those are kind of the main decisions that we have to make this week. And yeah, other than that, we're pretty much avoiding the rest of the groups, like you said. So yeah, let's move on to the Sunday slate of games. And we don't have any more London or Germany games. We are officially done with the international games. So kicking off the 1 p.m. slate, it is the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. And let's start with Tony Pollard, who hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1. Had a great matchup to do it last week against the Giants. He had his opportunities, wasn't able to get in there. Has another great matchup to do it again this week against the Panthers. So, Kate, what is your confidence level on Pollard getting in the end zone this week and ending this awful, awful drought?
So I'm generally kind of concerned about Tony Pollard. I kind of back several weeks ago, I was lukewarm, if you will. And I think after week 10 is this moment where I'm just watching Tony Pollard and I'm thinking he does not look like the same explosive running back that we saw. And I pulled up a lot of data. I highlighted this in my panic or antic column earlier this week, but when you look at the metrics for Tony Pollard, just overall like explosive play percentage, even speed, like overall efficiency, explosive run rate, yards after contact per attempt, touches per touchdown scored, of course. Like everything tells you that Tony Pollard's not as explosive as he has been throughout his career on average. So generally speaking, I don't know. I'm not feeling great. Rico Dowdle has actually looked kind of solid. He's one of my favorite what the heck flex plays this week. Coming off a season high 12 carries in week 10. He's outplayed Pollard in pretty much every efficiency metric. Has a 74.5 PFF rushing grade that leads all of the Dallas Cowboys running backs. I would not be surprised if in this matchup they get Dowdle some more touches with how he good last week. He got the rushing touchdown in week 10, which I'll remind you is just one fewer rushing touchdown than Tony Pollard on the year. So I'm lukewarm, and I'm warming up to Mr. Dowdle.
Yeah, this is devastating news for me, but it's all there, right? Like this is what it's been this season. So I understand it for sure. I mean, this is, he's looked good, and it feels like, Dowdle is this year's Tony Pollard and Tony Pollard is this year's Zeke or something.
Boo!
I
mean, I will say, if there is any matchup in which you're going to get the Tony Pollard rushing touchdown, I know we probably said the same exact thing last week against the Giants. Yeah. But since week 5, the Carolina Panthers have allowed a league high 27.22 fantasy points per game, also allowing a league high 1.4 rushing touchdowns to the running back position per game. Like, if he's not doing it this week, he's not doing it. And we got ourselves Houston, we have a problem. Dallas, we have a problem.
It's a big problem. And I'm with you. If it doesn't happen this week, then I'm giving up all hope that it's ever going to happen, because this is a great matchup to do it. Carolina giving up the second most points to running backs. You laid out the numbers there as well, as far as giving up rushing touchdowns. So there's hope for me. My heart tells me that he's going to be able to do it. He's going to come through. He's not going to let me down again. But I'm ready to get hurt one last time. I think this is it in a great matchup, but don't feel great about it, like you said. And maybe it could be Rico Dowdle's time to get in the end zone again this week. But other than that, I mean, the Dallas offense, CeeDee Lamb, we know we're putting him in lineups. Jake Ferguson, how do you feel about Jake Ferguson this week at tight end? Are you starting him? He's been, I think, tight end 5 over the last 3 weeks.
He's been absolutely freaking incredible. Now, I will say this is not a matchup I necessarily love. And that, I think, comes for a couple of reasons, right? So because the Panthers have been so bad against the run, they've seen a pretty, generally speaking, a low passing volume, a league low 52% pass percentage against the Carolina Panthers defense. And again, that's because they're a team that teams are running against. They're not necessarily in a position where they're forced to pass the ball. This has been a team that can, you're looking to run the clock out, right? Like you basically, you get the big lead to start the game, and then you run the clock out the rest of this just isn't a great matchup for passing offenses in general, because they don't need to. Why put yourself in that position? So that doesn't necessarily favor Jake Ferguson. And generally speaking, like the Panthers, they haven't faced a ton of great tight ends, but they've faced a couple. Sam Laporta, week 5, had 2 receiving touchdowns, but there hasn't been a single tight end this season to have more than 50 receiving yards. They've, played TJ Hawkins, and they played a couple of good tight ends, right? They played Travis Kelce. Like there's been, they paid TJ Hawkins, and sorry, I'm all over the place. But they just haven't given up a ton. Even Sam Laporta, he had those 2 receiving touchdowns, still didn't crack that 50 receiving yard mark. I'm just not loving this matchup in general. And I think you love the red zone usage. Probably going to be hard to sit Jake Ferguson unless you have one of these elite options, but hard to see a ton of upside here for this entire passing offense in general.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think, like you said, Jake Ferguson, starting, but on the lower end of that kind of tight end one range. And I think I'm with you 100% there for sure. And then yeah, I'm not as interested in the rest of the Dallas receiving options. I mean, Dak has been great lately too, so I feel like for the most part you're probably starting him, but Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, Jalen Tolbert, all those guys, no interest there for me at
No,
least.
no,
Yeah.
definitely not. Brandon Cooks, I know he's coming off a really fantastic outing in week 10.
Mhm.
9 receptions, 173 receiving yards and a score. But even that, like he actually played a season low 53% of offensive snaps.
Yeah.
I don't love that. It feels very fluky to me. And that was the second game all season where he's seen more than 4 targets in a single game. Not counting on that kind of volume, especially again, considering this hasn't been a situation where folks need to pass. So since they don't need to pass, I'll pass.
I like it. How about on the Carolina side of things? I mean, the
No,
main star here is Adam Thielen. Do you have he's you I know you wrote about him in Panic or Antic as well this past week. He's been down lately. Any faith in Adam Thielen against this Cowboys defense?
I think Adam Thielen, generally speaking, going to be fine, right? Like
Yeah.
he's been unproductive over the past 3 weeks since the bye. Wide receiver 24, wide receiver 43, wide receiver 35. Um, this isn't the matchup though that I'm like looking to target.
Mm-hmm.
The Cowboys. There is one threat on this team right now, and it's Adam Thielen. And this is a really good defense, and I don't trust that Bryce Young and Adam Thielen are going to be able to overcome this matchup. I'm entirely fading this whole Panthers offense.
Oh yeah.
Chuba Hubbard, if you're in a pinch, sure. But even Chuba Hubbard, who I've generally been favorable in terms of getting him into my lineups as a flex, not this week, my friend.
Yeah, I'm with you. And yeah, it was a bit frustrating to see Chuba Hubbard's kind of usage dip as well last week with Miles Sanders and even Raheem Blackshear working in there as well. So he's not in starting lineups for me either. And yeah, Adam Thielen, look, I mean, the Cowboys have been amazing. They've been great against fantasy wide receivers. So it makes him very tough to start. The one thing for Thielen is that he has performed best against man coverage. So this will be a really good test, I think, because he's been amazing against man coverage, but Dallas has been one of the best teams when playing man coverage. So it kind of evens out there in the wash. And I'm with you. I think Thielen is the one player, if you're the Dallas defense, to kind of focus on. That makes him kind of low end wide receiver too, I think, at best this week.
Yeah, full PPR formats, especially, you're still going to start
Mm-hmm.
him. He's still getting the target volume, etc. But just not a great matchup. Not a matchup I'm excited for nor want to target, especially in like daily fantasy, prize picks, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's go to an AFC South battle here. It is the Tennessee Titans against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And let's start with the Jaguars side of things because this offense outside of Travis Etienne has been kind of frustrating. We talked about Trevor Lawrence last week and not liking him in that game. Turns out we were definitely right about that when he was QB 29 last week. Still not loving him as like a top 12 option this week. Same goes with Calvin Ridley, who I don't think we can really trust right now either. I mean, the Titans, they've been pretty good matchup for wide receivers, but I, again, continue to like Christian Kirk more than Calvin Ridley again this week. And I don't know. Any faith, I guess, at all in Calvin Ridley? He's had over 90% route participation in pretty much every game. Target rate is kind of all over the place, and that's been the problem. And Trevor Lawrence not delivering catchable passes to him, and he's struggled as well. So I think that's kind of where a lot of this, underproduction comes from for Calvin Ridley. So where are you at with these Jaguars wide receivers this week?
Ice cold, ice
Ice
cold.
cold.
I think you'd go with Christian Kirk. Been kind of the one I think stable force on that offense. We talked about Evan Ingram too ahead of last week. That didn't pan out. Christian Kirk really is kind of the every down guy in this offense. Mm-hmm. And outside of that, there's a massive rotation that's been hugely unreliable. So yeah, I'm rolling with Christian Kirk. I think at this point you consider Calvin Ridley a wide receiver 3 flex
Mm-hmm.
play type guy. And if he outperforms that, great. But you're not, plugging and playing Christian Kirk on an every week basis the way that you are Christian Kirk.
Yeah, and look, even if Calvin really does have that big blow up game, I've seen enough this season that I don't know that I'm necessarily trusting it to happen again the following week, right? I want to see more consistency with Calvin Ridley because we've seen these ups and downs basically all throughout the season, and it's been mostly down, unfortunately. But yeah, anybody else on this Jaguars offense for you that's worth talking about?
I mean, I no,
No,
you're
right?
playing Travis Etienne.
Yeah,
I think at this point in the season, we have had it's not just week 10 that we saw, down performance from Trevor Lawrence. It's been all season. We have not
yeah.
seen that man hit a ceiling. He's yet to finish as a top 15 quarterback in a week. I think that's where we're at with Trevor Lawrence. Like, he's probably better left on your waiver wire, as much as it kills me to say about the guy who's throwing passes to Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne, and Evan Ingram. Like, it might be time to move on, folks.
Yeah, there's other guys that have stepped up, right, that we could trust instead. CJ Stroud and Sam Howell have been awesome, and definitely would rather be playing those guys in this week than I would be Trevor Lawrence. So yeah, I think that is pretty much it for this Jacksonville offense. How about on the Tennessee side of things? So again, another pretty straightforward offense here, because it feels like it's DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry, and that is pretty much it, at least for me. I mean, does anybody stand out for you as like a deeper play this week?
I got burned big time with Will Levis last week. I'm not falling trap again at this point. I'll wait and see. Didn't get involved as a rusher. Didn't take advantage of some of those injuries in the Bucs secondary. So given that circumstance, like I think the Jaguars have a better secondary than the Bucs at this point in the season. Not going to test Will Levis again against this team. It's Derrick Henry, like you said, DeAndre Hopkins or bust. And if now that I've said that, of course, Will Levis, big fan of the show. I hear he's going to hear this and he's going to go throw for another 4 touchdowns, which I'll be happy to see it.
As long as he throws them all to DeAndre Hopkins, maybe sprinkle one
Yes.
in there for Chico Okonkwo as well, just because that man needs some help. And as somebody that has to start Chico Okonkwo this week because I have Kyle Pitts and Hunter Henry on a bye in a deep league, I could really use it. But yeah, Okonkwo too had a big drop off in route participation last week. I think he dropped like 56% when it was up over 70% 3 weeks prior. So not great there for Okonkwo. Yeah, I think it really is just DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry, and Tajay Spears in like deep PPR leagues, you can hope for something, but not a great matchup for running backs either. So man, a pretty easy game, I think, to try to figure out there. So
yeah.
Let's move to an NFC East matchup here now between the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. Kate, when it comes to the Giants, again, we did this last week, keeping it short because there has been next to no fantasy production from this offense. So once again, any Giants offensive players that you're trusting in your lineup this week?
You're telling me you're not high on the Giants offense with Tommy DeVito, like Mr. Italiano. Yeah. I would trust him to make pasta. I would not trust him to, I don't even know if I should. I would trust his mother to make pasta.
I think
would
it's
not
his
trust
mom,
him to generate fantasy production for my squad.
Nope.
You still start Saquon Barkley because, like, what else are you going to do? But outside of that, absolutely no.
Yeah, it's a better matchup for Saquon Barkley than it was last week when he finished as like RB 38, I think, in PPR. So it was devastating for him. But I think I'm with you. I think you do kind of have to put him in here and hope that it's not a blowout or anything like that where Barkley gets pulled again too, and just hope that there's some dump off passes for him to kind of take advantage of in those PPR leagues. But it is a pretty gross offense right now for the Giants as they hopefully are looking for the number one overall pick in the draft. But on the Washington side of things, a little bit more of an interesting offense here because we got Terry McLaurin, we got Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson has been awesome, Sam Howell's been great, Logan Thomas has had his moments. So let's start with the wide receivers, I guess. And basically, I mean, the Giants too, like their defense has been pretty bad, I guess, for wide receivers. They're giving up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers. They're another one of these teams that plays man coverage at a very high rate, but they're not great at it. They're bottom 10 man coverage defense in yards allowed per reception, yards allowed per coverage snap, explosive play rate allowed. The only thing, so the Washington wide receivers have kind of struggled against man coverage this year, but I still like them a little bit in this matchup. I think it's a nice matchup for them to kind of get back on track as far as, facing man coverage goes. They've had some down weeks, Terry McLaurin, but I still like Terry McLaurin this week. How do you feel about Washington's wide receivers?
I'm feeling good. I know it's going to really sting, getting some of these guys back in your lineups. Like Jahan Dotson posted a big goose egg in week 10 up against the Seahawks. I think that this is a fine spot to kind of get back on track. The Giants have been a favorable matchup towards opposing wide receivers at this point in the season. I think in general, we still kind of know what we're doing with this team. We saw some, I think Brian Robinson, the overall RB1 last week. Now, Antonio Gibson, I believe, is listed with a toe injury on the most recent injury report. So that might be something to monitor here. Just moving forward, considering, toe injuries, not great, to have that sort of explosive element in your game and really play at your feet when you're making these cuts, got to have your toesies. And if Gibson can't go, we might see, I don't know, maybe another big outing here for Brian Robinson against a team that I don't think they're necessarily going to have to pass a ton on unless things get really out of hand in a way we don't expect.
Yeah, that will be a good one to monitor because I don't think Gibson's missed a game this year, so we haven't really seen what that usage has been. But I'm with you. I think it makes sense that they would kind of lean on Brian Robinson a little bit more this week. And yeah, having another big week, it would not be out of the realm of possibility. So I'm with you. I think, the main starters, obviously Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin, and then Dotson deep leagues. But and then I still like Sam Howell this week inside that QB1 range because he's just been so good and they pass a ton. So I like that. But might not have to this week. So on the lower end of ranges there. Other than that, let's go to our first ad break of the day. It is our friends at Prize Picks. So Kate, we got a couple picks here. So I talked about this one on, I guess it was Tuesday, and it's kind of my like on tilt / going with my heart, hoping that it happens pick. And that is Tony Pollard over 0.5 touchdowns. Doesn't have to be rushing necessarily, could be receiving. He could even pass for one. Whichever happens, he has to get in the end zone this week. I called it a do or die on Tuesday. Nate said he tried to talk me off the ledge, said it's not do or die, but I don't know. I'm feeling pretty down about Tony Pollard lately. So I am putting a hopeful bet on Tony Pollard to go over 0.5 touchdowns. This week, Panthers have allowed 15 rushing touchdowns on the year, tied for the second most. They've given up second most points to fantasy running backs. Third worst run defense grade in the league as far as the team grades go. So yeah, like you said, if not now, then he may never score again. So it is do or die for me for Tony Pollard this week.
This week, I like it. Like I said, if it doesn't happen this week, it's not going to. So this is your one time to pull the trigger. I'm rolling with Dalton Kincaid, Buffalo Bills tight end, over 50.5 receiving yards. He's hit that mark for the last 4 weeks. And we don't have Dalton Kincaid back in the mix just yet. The Jets, they've been kind of a challenging matchup for these wide receivers, but the one soft spot they've had is up against this tight end. I think they're going to continue to feed the rookie. And I love that line here at 50.5.
Perfect. That's great. So yeah, we'll hope that those hit. And yeah, like with Prize Picks, the basketball season is here as well. So you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. So for example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions. Go to prizepicks.com/PFF fantasy. Use code PFF fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/PFF fantasy and use code PFF fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. All right. NFC North matchup is next between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions, and the return of Justin Fields for Chicago and maybe Khalil Herbert. So Kate, if Khalil Herbert plays for Chicago, how would you feel about playing anyone from this Chicago backfield in week 11?
Probably still lean towards D'Onta Foreman if I have to start somebody. Right now, I'm not looking to get Khalil Herbert back in the mix just right off the gate. Seeing the amount of efficiency that we've had from D'Onta Foreman, like I think this is an opportunity for this team to just kind of take it slow, right, and get a temperature check, see how Khalil Herbert kind of responds, how he's feeling with that hamstring, and not get too aggressive right out of the gate. I'm not looking to dabble in my Khalil Herbert shares just yet, but yeah, I'll roll with D'Onta Foreman, just knowing that like expectations are going to be a bit lower in this week, just given the fact that we don't know how this usage is going to shake up, right? Like just towards the beginning of the year, we saw D'Onta Foreman benched. He was a healthy scratch in favor of, Roschon, in favor of Khalil Herbert. Now I would not be surprised, just given the usage, if we saw, Roschon be a potential inactive. We've seen Darrington Evans be involved. Like it's a hodgepodge, but I do think right now the steam seems to be in favor of Foreman.
Yeah, I'm with you there for sure. I would not be trusting Khalil Herbert this week. I think he, like you said, could be eased back in action. Definitely pushes Roschon Johnson out of playable territory for me as well. But like I said, Justin Fields coming back as well. So, Kate, I know you wrote about DJ Moore too in the Panic or Antic article. So, with Justin Fields back under center, how are you feeling about DJ Moore this week?
It's full go. Like it is what it is. I don't think they would. This team would have him back in the mix if he couldn't grip and throw a football properly. They've been pretty cautious to this point, and really like the bulk of DJ Moore's down production has come on the back of Tyson Bagent. I think as long as you have Justin Fields in the lineup, I think you can assume he's healthy. And if that's the case, then yeah, you go back to the well, because that was a very fruitful connection that we had to start the season. It was just heating up before we lost Justin Fields to injury. I think you start DJ Moore, you start Justin Fields, you start Cole Kmet, even if you're in need of a tight end in a given matchup. But I mean that's kind of your entire Chicago Bears offense, right?
Yeah, those are the three for me as well. And yeah, I'm hopeful that DJ Moore gets back on track this week as well. That catchable target rate for DJ Moore was below 70% in each of the past 3 weeks with Tyson Bagent at quarterback, and that only happened once with Justin Fields at quarterback. So should be a much better day for DJ Moore, with the Lions also giving up the 10th most points to wide receivers. So not a bad matchup for him to try to take advantage of.
For sure.
And then on the Lions side of things, I mean, we saw Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery be really strong fantasy producers this past week. We saw Gibbs getting some more goal line work as well, which was great, but it didn't completely take away the goal line work from David Montgomery, who was still involved there. So you feel pretty good about starting both of these running backs here, Kate?
I'm not loving this matchup. And I will say I'm a little bit more panicked about David Montgomery than maybe most would be at this point. I know like we saw a fairly even work split. We saw David Montgomery got just 2 fewer carries than Jahmyr Gibbs on the day. Had a 70-yard or 75-yard rushing touchdown, which you'd love to see. But you can't bank on those every single week. Like that is not an every week occurrence. And I do think that this shift toward Jahmyr Gibbs in the red zone, like keep in mind, prior to the injury for Montgomery in week 6, he was handling almost 75% of the red zone rushing attempts, almost 73%, exactly 73% of the carries inside the goal line. And all of a sudden, week 10 comes around, Gibbs, like the lightning's out of the bottle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Gibbs totaled 5 red zone carries, 3 inside the 5-yard line. Montgomery saw 4, 2 inside the 5-yard line. So the split is rapidly closing. And with the assumption that Montgomery isn't going to break off 75-yard runs every week, I'm a little nervous. This isn't necessarily a great matchup either. Like, again, sort of maybe on paper, looks like a better matchup than it is. Like this Bears defense has been absolutely suffocating in recent weeks. And I don't know that there's going to be a ton of upside for this rushing game this week. And I don't know. I might be one of the only people in the world who isn't excited coming off of David Montgomery's, I think it was 17 fantasy points last week. And I'm still tepid at best when it comes to the backfield.
I'm with you. I mean, look, the 75-yard touchdown, like you said, those aren't stable things to kind
They
of
don't
bank
grow on
on week
trees.
to week. No, they do not. And that it definitely bodes well for Jahmyr Gibbs, though, right? Like he is kind of a pretty much locked in top 10 running back, I feel like, at this point, because of his usage growing, like you said. And yeah, we'll see how things kind of shake out here in the next week or two with David Montgomery now back from injury and how he kind of works in. But yeah, if Gibbs continues the takeover there, then that is a huge advantage for him and a big hit to Montgomery as well. So yeah, something to watch for sure. I like what you said there. And yeah, other than that, I mean, the wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown obviously is starting, but I kind of like Josh Reynolds as a deeper play this week. He's been fine every once in a while, and this could be one of those games for me where I might feel okay plugging him into like a deeper lineup. Favorable matchup, at least as far as our man zone coverage report goes. He actually leads the Lions wide receivers with 0.43 fantasy points per route run against man coverage. It's not like a high number, but definitely tops on the Lions right now. The Bears have played a league average rate of both man and zone, but they are second worst or seventh worst in the league as far as defensive success rate in both man and zone. So they've also given up a first down or a touchdown on 48.6% of man coverage snaps, which is the second worst mark. So Josh Reynolds, deeper league play for me just because of his success against man. And I say success lightly, and this is really one of those like wide receiver 4 type plays. I know there's plenty of larger league sizes out there, so somebody to kind of consider for those league types.
Yeah, I think that's a fair move. And if you're not bold enough to roll with Reynolds in a season-long league, his prize picks projections this week, just at 31.5 receiving yards. Like,
okay, that's
palatable. That's definitely palatable.
Yeah, 31.5. I don't mind. Actually,
Mash the
I like
more.
that one. There you go. But anybody else on Detroit? We like Sam Laporta this week, I assume.
You like Sam Laporta each and every week, and you let nobody tell you otherwise. You roll with Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff. Like, we know what the offense is. Like I said, the only guy that is kind of like, a guy you're starting in fantasy leagues that I'm tempering expectations for this week. Definitely David Montgomery, definitely, expecting a relatively quieter week for Jahmyr Gibbs, but I mean, both of these guys have shown the ability to break off some long runs and be explosive in their own regard. So you can never count them out, but again, just kind of tempering expectations with the knowledge that this has been a matchup that you can target through the air. So like, why you might not necessarily try to force the run as much, knowing that the Bears have been kind of heating up in their rushing defense in the second half of the season.
Yeah, they've been surprisingly good lately, and we've talked about that before. So, something to keep an eye on there. But let's go on to more divisional matchups, and this one is from the AFC North. It is Kate's Pittsburgh Steelers going against the Cleveland Browns. No Deshaun Watson for the rest of the season. So Dorian Thompson-Robinson going to start at quarterback. And Kate, let's start with the Browns this time. They look great in the second half last week against Baltimore to get the win. But what do you think about this offense with DTR at quarterback? Anyone you're particularly interested in for Cleveland going against Pittsburgh?
Not really, honestly. Like I know you start, your Amari Cooper, you start your Jerome Ford. Maybe I know that Hunt has been on a bit of a tear when it comes to rushing touchdowns, but even Hunt, I'm a little ambivalent about. I think you kind of start the guys that are going to get lots of targets. We did see with DTR in his first go around week 4, David Njoku led the team in targets for him. So I think definitely a fine volume-based play, but defensively, the Pittsburgh Steelers been pretty solid against opposing tight ends. So even then, not necessarily expecting a ton of upside here in this matchup. For anybody in the Browns, you're starting who you're starting, and then you're saying a prayer.
Yeah, I'm with you. I get the feeling that this is going to be one of those games where the Browns might really focus on trying to run the ball. They already do that quite a bit, but with Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback, I feel like this could be one of those really run-heavy approaches for Cleveland. So Jerome Ford, definitely somebody that I'd be interested in. It makes me a little bit worried about Amari Cooper. So I don't love him this week, even though I think most leagues are probably still starting him, but
I think you're
it's
starting him just,
yeah,
based on the upside. Like he is really good, like
he is
hashtag
good.
really
He
good at
is
football.
good.
But
Yeah,
I could envision Joey Porter playing a decent amount of coverage on him. Joey Porter's been incredible this year.
yeah.
Really kind of limiting some of that upside we saw for opposing wide receivers that we saw early in the year. So again, just kind of tempering expectations, even though you're probably not going to be in a position where you have, the luxury of sitting Amari Cooper, maybe Jerome Ford, but David Njoku, I think from a volume standpoint, you start him, but
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be excited about any of these guys unless they happen to score a touchdown.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the right way to look at it here. I think we could, see a lot of run game, a lot of like quick game as well, wide receiver screens and that sort here to try to supplement the offense a little bit in Thompson-Robinson's favor. But yeah, I'm with you. It's not one that we're particularly excited about, and kind of feeling the same way about the Steelers offense. I don't know about you, but Najee and Jalen Warren delivered nicely last week, but how do you feel about this running back group this week against the Browns, who obviously we know one of the best defenses in the league here, and the 50-50 split has kind of continued. Warren did see slightly more work last week. Najee's getting the goal line work still. So do you have confidence that you could trust one or both again this week?
I think if you absolutely need to, it's fine. This seems to be like the one thing that's actually kind of working for the Steelers offense. You like the fact that the offensive line has looked solid. That just seems to be the one element that's gelling for the Steelers offense at this point. So I think if you need to, you still roll with it. But again, this is a matchup like last week against the Packers, not a terrible matchup against the run this year. The Cleveland Browns have been a much more suffocating matchup against the run, against the pass, against literally everything. I think we could expect, maybe continued volume considering that's been working for this team. But I think generally speaking, you're probably not going to be expecting a ton of efficiency, even though we did see some of that in week 10.
Yeah, it's a tough matchup, but Najee Harris he's playing really well lately. He's been a lot more efficient, but it's more the matchup than anything. I think there will be better weeks where we can feel better about putting both these guys in, but not necessarily this week. And the other thing here for Pittsburgh's offense is the wide receivers, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. So the Browns, one of those teams again that has a very high success rate while playing man coverage, and they are first in the league as far as playing man coverage goes. So The good thing with George Pickens and Deontay Johnson is they've actually seen like elite target rates when facing man coverage is like 30% for George Pickens, 37% for Deontay Johnson. So potential at least for volume there, but yeah, it's still going to be one of their tougher tests this week. And I don't know that I'm particularly excited about either one of these guys too, because I think it's more going to come down to Kenny Pickett trying to deal with this Browns defense more than anything than trusting Pickens or Deontay Johnson to do something. We need Kenny Pickett to do something first, which I don't have faith that he'll be able to necessarily get it done against Cleveland.
No, and something else to keep an eye on, Deontay Johnson didn't practice Wednesday with a thumb injury. It's a new one. Take it with a grain of salt because Deontay Johnson literally always banged up. Yeah. Always. It does not matter what the game is, what the injury, like he's always got some sort of ailment, but a thumb injury, I hear thumbs are important in the hand catching process. So if there is a real issue there and it's not just like I banged my thumb on a coffee table kind of thing, a little bit of concern there, which might open things up a little bit for George Pickens. Obviously, if it's a thumb injury, maybe you have him out there in more of a decoy role. Maybe that funnels a little bit more volume toward George Pickens, which, when you get the target share there, there's always some big play potential, even against a tough Browns defense. But, Pat Freiermuth's there. They haven't really been working in the middle of the field. Like this is just kind of a hodgepodge. And we're still, I think, trying to figure out what the identity of this offense is outside of the run game, at least for now. And lots of question marks there that make it really hard to trust we're in week 11. We're trying to lock down, a win or two to notch our trip to the championship here, our trip to the playoffs. Like this is not a great time to be dabbling and experimenting with the Pittsburgh offense, unfortunately, but do your best.
Yeah. Do your best is a good way to say it. But yeah, like you said, if Deontay Johnson does miss this game for whatever reason, like we did see George Pickens have success against the Browns without Johnson in the lineup in week 2, I guess it was, where Pickens had 127 yards, a touchdown, and no Deontay Johnson in that one. But if Johnson is in the lineup, we're also getting Freiermuth in there. It just makes it a little harder to trust the potential for volume and efficiency against a very good defense. So all right, let's go on to a couple of sub 500 teams here. It's the Los Angeles Chargers at the Green Bay Packers. Los Angeles has been a fairly easy offense to sort out here with Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, but Quentin Johnston scores his first NFL touchdown last week. Kate, did that make him any more trustworthy for you as a fantasy starter this week?
No.
No, right?
No.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to say this. No. And, again, I'm more of a cautious mindset. But again, this Packers defense, like not necessarily been a huge pushover to this point in the season, allowing the 28th most fantasy points to wide receivers. That is #bad. Again, this has been a defense that's a little bit more susceptible to the run. We saw that with the Steelers last week. They were able to exploit that, despite the fact that there was pretty much no threat of the pass. I think this is a great spot for Austin Eckler. I don't necessarily know that I want to get. It feels like you'd be getting cute with Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, I'm with you. And over the last 2 games without Josh Palmer, 9% target rate, 11% target rate. Like the touchdown was nice, but I don't think this is something that we're trusting at this point in the season until we see some more consistency there. So that is pretty much the Chargers offense for me. But the Green Bay offense is a tricky one to kind of sort out. So we'll spend some time there, I guess, and maybe start with the wide receivers, because I think that's been the kind of the biggest mess. And so last week I wrote up Jayden Reed in the wide receiver man zone coverage report, and I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast or not, because that that's too many things to remember for me. But the the Chargers have played zone coverage at a top 10 rate. They've given up an explosive play on 16.7% of coverage snaps while in zone. That's the fourth worst mark in the NFL. They've also allowed 8.5 yards per coverage target, 7.39 yards per coverage snaps, and 12 yards per reception while in zone. And those are all bottom 5 results. So it's a good matchup for wide receivers here. And Jayden Reed, coming off I guess like wide receiver 12 PPR finish, I think it was, continues to be, a strong, I think, deep league option because he's performed well against zone coverage so far this year. He leads the Packers wide receivers heading into this week in fantasy points per route run against zone with 0.39, which is tied for 33rd among wide receivers. He's got a team leading receiving grade against zone and yards per route run against zone, both leading the team. But I feel like a good again about Jayden Reed is a deeper play. Christian Watson is probably the bigger question mark, I think. I don't know about you, but catchable target rate has been 50% or less over the last 3 games. He has the highest average depth of target on the team as well, so they're harder passes to try and complete. And Jordan Love's just hasn't been great this year. So anybody that you're interested in here for Green Bay?
No, you're already kind of rolling the dice in general with this entire receiving core. I think Jayden Reed, a really nice bet, especially with how efficient he's been over the last 2 outings, averaging 1.79 yards per route run. And, 2.3 yards per route run. You like the efficiency there for Jayden Reed, but for Romeo Doubs, even having a relatively high target share, we're just not seeing that same sort of efficiency. For me, it goes Jayden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. The one thing to note about Romeo Doubs is this high rate of usage here in the red zone, end zone. To this point in the season, Doubs is tied with CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Lockett to lead the league with 11 red zone targets this year. Like, he's been the guy there, and he's converted a fair number of those. Again, this is a decent matchup for opposing wide receivers, so this could be a good spot for one of these guys at the very least to find the end zone. Also think, Jordan Love, given that matchup against the pass, I think is a fine, what the heck, give it a try. Like I could see him posting, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and you'll have yourself that day. Like that's kind of where I'm at with this team. But again, I think anytime you're starting any of these Green Bay Packers, you're not expecting, there's no guarantees. I think regard anybody in this offense, just in general, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. And same thing with Luke Musgrave. Like, I wish he was getting more of those end zone targets. I think he got his first one of the year just last week. And it was definitely not a catchable pass. So it makes it harder for him too. But decent matchup, at least for him to put up maybe some potential yardage, at least. Luke Musgrave, but probably not starting him if you got better options at tight end this week. All right, on to Raiders and the Dolphins. Dolphins are coming off a bye week and a loss in Germany to the Chiefs, but it seems that they are getting Devin Achane or Achan. He's been out for a while. I can't remember how to pronounce his name now. I think it's Achan. Back this week, much to the delight of fantasy managers. Last we saw him, he was one of the darlings of fantasy football. So we saw him and Raheem Mostert both doing their thing. They were both active, saw very close usage. Mostert did see more snaps and rush attempts and routes run overall, but Achan had the higher target share, target rate, super close there. But Mostert, again, was delivering as well, right? Both of these guys delivered. They're both explosive running backs. How do you feel about if Achan is back in the lineup, about both of these guys, I guess Achan and Mostert this week?
I think you play them. Like I think that's kind of where we're at. I mean the efficiency for Achan was just off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the beauty of both of these running backs, and I think the reason you can start both of these running backs is their efficiency is so off the charts that it doesn't really matter that they're splitting touches, right? Because they are like, it doesn't take much. Like 3 full games that we saw from Achan, 13.8 yards per touch, 10.9 yards per touch, 10.6 yards per touch, 7 touchdowns in the span that he played, over the full period of the game. In each of those 3 games, didn't have a single outing with a run less than 55 yards. Like he was just so explosive. It just doesn't take much. I mean, 55 rushing yards on a single gain. Like, you might take 55 rushing yards from a running back in your flex play happily.
Yeah.
And Achane can get that on one run, and so can Raheem Mostert. So I think you roll with it and hope that he is as explosive as it seems like he's looked in practice so far in his return. But I think as long as he's active, you play him.
Yeah, I like it. Anybody else on Miami that's worth talking about? I mean, we know who Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are, but and Tua Tagovailoa, but anybody else worth discussing?
No.
Probably not, right? Yeah. Let's look at the Las Vegas Raiders here, because AOC, Aiden O'Connell back at QB here, and obviously we like Josh Jacobs, but Davante Adams really been the only one getting fed lately. He's had a minimum 23% target rate in each of the last 4 games. The Jacoby Myers target rate is what's concerning, and we've talked about it a few times with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. It's been 9%, 24%, back down to 7%. So not all bad, but definitely not nearly as excited about Jacoby Myers as I was in the first month or so of the season. So he could potentially be somebody that we can start to avoid if this kind of continues here, unfortunately. With the change at quarterback, just not able to sustain more than one pass catcher here, and it's probably going to be Davante Adams again.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. It's Davante Adams or bust for me. Josh Jacobs, you're starting him on a volume basis. But again, sort of the lack of the pass here really, allows opposing defenses to kind of hone in against the run. So hopefully they can get something going with Davante Adams. Maybe they can get Jacoby Myers a little bit involved, but the only 2 Raiders that I'm allowing anywhere near my fantasy lineups right now are Josh Jacobs and Davante Adams. And if, Jacoby Myers posts 15 points or so on my bench, that's okay. Cause I think the floor is going to be so low, it's probably not going to be worth it.
Yeah, and he had the rushing touchdown as well, which really helped him the other week, and like that's not something that Jacoby Myers is necessarily known for either, or that we can bank on. So it is definitely concerning, but that you're right, that is basically the the Raiders offense here. So let's go to the Kyler Murray led Arizona Cardinals and the CJ Stroud led Houston Texans. Kate, where do you want to start with this game?
Should we start maybe with I don't know, the offensive rookie of the year? Maybe we should talk about CJ Stroud and this crazy Texans offense. Like,
Man,
CJ Stroud is absolutely playing out of his mind, and it's something that like I never thought would translate for fantasy production specifically. Like, coming out of Ohio State, you knew he was mobile, but it wasn't necessarily like he used that mobility as a key part of his game, gaining rushing yards. Like, he's showing all of that and more, and he's utilized this, receiving core incredibly well. So like, are you like waiting for the shoe to drop at all with CJ Stroud, or do you think this is the new Texans and that they've officially arrived?
yeah, I you know what? I haven't even really thought that the other shoe was going to drop here. I felt pretty good about this offense. Like I think CJ Stroud's doing a nice job, and I feel comfortable in the weapons that he has, guys like Tank Dell and Nico Collins and apparently Noah Brown as well. But like whoever kind of steps in there, that this offense has made it happen. And the offensive philosophy too of just passing the ball at a very high rate has worked out with CJ Stroud at quarterback. So I feel pretty good about this offense. I feel good about Tank Dell starting him. I know Nico Collins was a limited participant with that calf injury on Wednesday, but I do think he said he was going to play this week. So I think he's going to be in there. Noah Brown, I think, is going to be questionable as well. I don't know if he's necessarily going to play last I saw, but I mean, look, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, these guys have been excellent all year. And funny enough, Dalton Schultz too. Yeah. Like I'm not sitting Dalton Schultz, considering how involved he's been in that passing offense and how much they pass leaves plenty of opportunities. So I don't think there's much question there. The question probably is at running back if Dameon Pierce is back. He was DNP on Wednesday, so don't know that he'll be back this week. Hopefully he's not, because it keeps things pretty easy for us, and we can trust Devin Singletary, who dominated the touches the last 2 games without Dameon Pierce and obviously had the big game last week. So if Dameon Pierce does play, I still prefer Devin Singletary because he's been kind of out working and outplaying Dameon Pierce when they've both been healthy. But yeah, I don't know. I feel good about this offense. It's one of the few that I'm comfortable with. I know what I'm getting and feel good about putting these guys into lineups.
Yeah, I want them to get healthy first and foremost,
Yeah.
but definitely when healthy, I think this is going to be nightmare of an offense to try to contain with the number of weapons they have. If Dameon Pierce returns, not super and not looking to start him in his first game back, especially given the success that Devin Singletary has had, they might feel comfortable kind of easing him slowly back into that mix, coming off such an outstanding performance in week 10. You feel okay about Devin Singletary, but other than that, I think you start the pass catchers that are healthy for this team. The whoever's active is probably going to be in my fantasy lineups. Even Noah Brown, I think his status, of course, up in the air, but I mean, really hard to beat the production we've seen from them, since this has been 2 straight weeks of like big boom performances. Yeah. This team's just not slowing down, and I love it.
Yeah, they're not. I wish it was like John Mechie or somebody getting more involved there, but it's Noah Brown, and he's been good with his opportunities. So yeah, I feel like we can trust Brown if for whatever reason Nico Collins is out, but it seems like Nico Collins will play. Yeah. So then on the Arizona side of things, like I said, Kyler Murray is back. He looked pretty healthy last week. He had the 6 runs, had like 33 rushing yards, added a rushing touchdown as well. We also got James Conner back. He was nearly his normal workload. I think he was like a 60-something% offensive snap share. We saw Keontae Ingram and Tony Jones kind of work in a little bit, but otherwise it was full go for James Conner. So feel good about him again in that kind of RB2 range again. How about the wide receivers for the Arizona Cardinals? And we could include tight end in there too, because Trey McBride has been awesome at tight end. So where do you want to go, wide receiver or tight end for Arizona?
I think tight end's kind of easy at this point, right? We saw a down week from Trey McBride here a couple weeks ago, but bounced right back. I mean, Kyler Murray, he's targeted the tight end position pretty heavily. Not just this year, but last year as well, especially last year without DeAndre Hopkins. We saw a ton of usage for Zach Ertz, and that translated immediately. Like, boom, you have kind of a similar structured offense to what we saw last season when he didn't have DeAndre Hopkins, and that kind of bore out with, more work for second-year tight end Trey McBride. It's been kind of a roller coaster, but I think he's a guy that in matchups that aren't overly suffocating, like, week 9 against the Browns, that was not a good matchup to trust Trey McBride in, but in okay to good matchups, I think you start Trey McBride without question rest of season.
Yeah, and the Texans are giving up the 3rd most points to tight ends as well, so that really helps. McBride, 84.6 receiving grade, 2nd best among tight ends, and then without Zach Ertz the last 3 weeks too, 39% target rate, 25% target rate, 32% target rate. So just elite numbers there from Trey McBride. I think, he could keep it going here with Kyler in the lineup, obviously really helps him as well. And then wide receiver, I don't know. These guys not as interested. Like, I continue to like Michael Wilson as one of those deeper plays too, just because he's got really good numbers against zone coverage. And almost scored a touchdown, was like inches short of the goal line last week. I liked him as a deep play then, and he almost got in for me, but still kind of like him this week. He's the Texans, one of the more zone heavy defenses in the league, and Wilson has performed well against zone. So deep leagues, don't mind Michael Wilson, Hollywood Brown in that kind of wide receiver 3 range for me. All right, quick ad break here from Manscaped. Cue dramatic music, public service announcement. It's not a bird, it's not a plane. It's the most revolutionary ball trimmer the world has ever seen. Gentlemen, our friends over at Manscaped have been working night and day to bring you the below-the-waist grooming experience like none other with their brand new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. We're talking about a next-generation trimmer with interchangeable blade heads for whatever shave your mind can imagine. AI is cool, but I think this might be the biggest technological advancement the world has ever seen. Upgrade your grooming game to the Ultra Sphere this year by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with code PFF. High tech for low places. Manscaped. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. I can promise you've never seen a ball trimmer look like a spaceship. Get yours today from our folks at Manscaped. All right, off to the NFC West now. It is the Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams. It seems like Matthew Stafford will be back in the lineups, thankfully, for guys like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. We're starting those guys. Is there anyone else that you like for the Rams this week, Kate?
No, I think that outside of the primary weapons, you'd be getting a little bit too cute. And now I think the biggest question people might have is like, okay, so Matthew Stafford, if he's good to go for this game, like, can you really trust that he's going to be able to deliver the ball, to his wide receivers? I think yes. But again, not a guy that I'm looking to start for fantasy football. Despite the fact that this was generally, with Matthew Stafford, it's been a very productive passing offense. Plenty of volume, plenty of yardage. This hasn't been a very fruitful offense for passing touchdowns so far this season. So, I think you take that with a grain of salt, but, especially in full PPR formats, you're like full steam ahead. Otherwise, I'm not getting cute outside of this receiving core.
Yep, I'm with you there for sure. And yeah, you start Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. I know Devin Witherspoon, the rookie, has been excellent. Tariq Woolen has been really good as well, but it really helps to have Matthew Stafford back, at least for target rate for those guys. So they should be able to get some nice volume production for us this week. But yeah, outside of that, don't really care for this Rams offense. It could potentially be getting Kyren Williams back in week 12, but we'll have to kind of wait and see because, the backfield is much clearer when Kyren Williams was in there. It has not been clear with Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman in the lineup. So I think we can safely avoid those guys in most leagues. On the Seattle side of things, the backfield has continued to be interesting. I know that Zach Charbonnet has now outsnapped Kenneth Walker the last 3 weeks, but could be more of a game script thing. But I mean, it is still at least interesting because it wasn't really close prior to those last 3 games. So I think we'll still see Charbonnet involved this week regardless, probably just not enough to make it into most starting lineups. But what's your comfort level on this Seattle backfield? I feel like Kenneth Walker's still a solid start.
Kenneth Walker still a solid start, coming off a season high 64 receiving yards last week. Took a nice long catch down the field, not necessarily been overly involved as a receiver. I think that's kind of a role we can pigeon in for Zach Charbonnet. But the issue is, like, when Charbonnet's been on the field, he hasn't been getting touches. So we're looking at this backfield, and yes, though the split and snap share might be concerning, it's Kenneth Walker that's actually touching the ball at a much higher rate when he's actually on the field. Last week had 20 total touches. Like, you're not complaining about that whatsoever. And I mean, despite the fact that he had, back-to-back down weeks, like, he has had 17 plus carries in all but 3 games this season. And I think he's RB1 for this team. And given the fact that Charbonnet's presence on the field hasn't necessarily translated to touches, for the time being, I think we can feel pretty comfortable with Walker until we start to see in increase in touch percentage for Charbonnet when he's actually on the field.
Yep, I agree 100% there. And then on the other side of things, I guess it's the passing offense for Seattle, right? Geno Smith continues to not be amazing here at quarterback, and we touched on his numbers a little bit last week, but how does that leave you feeling for like guys like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and even Jackson Smith and Jigba for those deeper leagues?
I'm still kind of tepid, honestly. I know that like Geno Smith actually, coming off one of his best games this season for fantasy. I'm not like, you're starting Tyler Lockett, you're starting DK Metcalf. Obviously, we're starting to see that increased role for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't feel super strongly about any of them in this particular matchup. It's a very familiar divisional foe. I could see this being kind of an ugly game script. I'm not dying to get any of them in my lineups. I think it's Lockett for me. It's Metcalf, and then I know Smith and Jigba has been looking fantastic. I know he's been scoring some touchdowns, but can you trust it? I'm not 100% sure that we can continue to buy in unless you're just looking for like a guy that's going to get you like 10 PPR points. I think that's right what we can expect from Jackson Smith and Jigba in particular.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair for sure. And we'll see what happens here. But don't mind DK Metcalf in that wide receiver 2 range more than anything. Like he's not like a must start, in shallow leagues, but he's been good. He's been perfectly fine. It should be an okay matchup. All right, Tampa Bay and San Francisco are up next, and some more pretty straightforward offenses here. Rachaad White has been on fire lately as well. So let's start with the Bucks. We know we're starting Mike Evans, Rachaad White, and Chris Godwin is kind of interesting. I think, for somebody that has been a little inconsistent at times, should be in a decent spot here. So again, kind of go into the man zone coverage report. Godwin's been much better against man coverage. He's generated 0.51 fantasy points per route run against man, which is tied for 23rd among wide receivers. Really high target rate as well at 26% against man coverage. He leads the team in receiving grade, 77.3 against man. 49ers are one of those teams that play a little bit of both. They play man and zoned, and they've been really good in zone, but have been like the complete opposite in when they're in man. The man coverage defense for 49ers have been they've allowed 15.2 yards per reception, which is second worst, and they've allowed a first down or touchdown on 44.3% of their man coverage snaps, which is a bottom 10 mark as well. So I don't mind Chris Godwin in, that kind of wide receiver 2-3 fringe range for me this year or this week, because he's been able to take advantage of those man coverage matchups, and I could see a little bit of it here against San Francisco. So I don't know. How do you feel about the Bucks offense?
Bucks offense, I do feel like it, like you said, kind of a straightforward one at this point. Chris Godwin, we really haven't seen a super high ceiling for him just in general this season, but generally speaking, been pretty safe, had 50 plus receiving yards in all but 2 games this season so far. The big killer has been touchdowns, which that has been Mike Evans' forte. So again, kind of like Smith and Jigba here for the Seahawks. I think you're looking at Chris Godwin and saying like, okay, if I'm in a full PPR format and I need, 10 to 15 points, like light up Chris Godwin. Otherwise, you might be disappointed on the week, because I do think that Mike Evans and Rachaad White seem to have carved out a role for themselves as the higher upside receiving weapons, as crazy as that sounds. The 49ers, for as tough a matchup as they can be on the ground, middle of the pack in terms of allowing receiving yards to opposing running backs, should be a fair spot for Rachaad White to get a decent amount of yardage as a receiver, which that's where he's been used. But yeah, otherwise, I think this Bucks offense generally pretty safe. I'm not even getting cute with Cade Otton. We saw him come back to earth last week. I think it's pretty straightforward here. It's Mike Evans, it's Rachaad White, and other than that, the rest of this offense might get demolished. Get cute with Chris Godwin if you want. But just know that ceiling hasn't been here for him this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, Rashad White too, like not a great matchup for like rushing production, but he's been so good like for PPR leagues. He's been getting a ton of opportunity there. So that's always been nice.
Rashad
And then
White has been producing in the receiving game like we hoped Chris Godwin would be producing in the receiving game. So what a wacky world we live in.
It's crazy. It's nuts. So, yeah. Let's look at the 49ers pretty quickly here because Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle are all pretty much in starting lineups for the most part. Deebo Samuel as well, definitely opportunity to put him in the lineups. I don't know. I mean, anybody that stands out on San Francisco that you really dislike or a deep play that you do like for the 49ers?
No, I think you kind of said it. Like you start your 49ers in this matchup. I highlighted the Buccaneers as a secondary to kind of target that did not turn out the way I hoped it would here for the Tennessee Titans last week, but 49ers, a much more efficient passing offense than the Tennessee Titans. They have a lot more weapons, a lot more ground that these Buccaneers would need to cover. So I think this could be a day where Brock Purdy has one of the best fantasy days in his career with the myriad of weapons and the amount of success that this Buccaneers defense might have against this offense, which I don't think is a lot. I expect a poor showing from this Buccaneers defense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Brock Purdy this week as well. Buck's given up the 5th most points to quarterbacks. Brock Purdy's had a top 12 fantasy QB finish 6 times this year, which is definitely more than like a Trevor Lawrence, for example. So another one of those guys that we could be putting in ahead of Trevor Lawrence this week as well. But yeah, it's a pretty easy couple teams to go through there. So let's go to the Jets and the Bills next. And let's start with really a couple quarterbacks prone to turning the ball over here recently. It's as Zach Wilson versus Josh Allen. So where do you want to start with this game?
Let's start with the Jets. I feel like the Jets are fairly simple. It's Garrett Wilson. End of sentence. I do think this could be an interesting spot, maybe for Tyler Conklin, who's been a little bit more involved in the receiving game over the last couple of weeks. He's ranked 2nd in team target share over the past 2 weeks, only behind, of course, Garrett Wilson. And this defense in general, this Bills defense, been a middle of the pack matchup against opposing tight ends. I think it's a fine place if you are in desperate need of a tight end. Conklin is available in the majority of leagues, but I think it's Wilson. Garrett Wilson. Not Zach. Do not get them
the
confused.
other way.
That would not be pretty. No.
Yeah, nobody's getting those two confused, I would hope. But yeah, I'm with you. It's Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and the deeper leagues. I'm looking at a shot at tight end there, Tyler Conklin. Yeah, he's seen the targets lately, which has been nice. So could be some room for him there. And then on the Bills side of things, I mean, obviously Stephon Diggs, we feel good about. Josh Allen, he obviously has had the turnovers lately, and he had the rough game against the Jets in week 1, I guess it was, but he's still not leaving lineups just for that potential upside there. Same thing with even Dalton Kincaid. So the question marks, I think, are probably around James Cook and Gabe Davis this week. So Gabe Davis has really struggled significantly against man coverage this year, which the Jets have been really good at. He's recorded 0.19 fantasy points per route run against man. That's tied for 89th among wide receivers. He's 80th in receiving grade versus man with a 59.6, 78th in yards per route run versus man. He's one of those players to potentially avoid this week for me, as the Jets do play a fair share of man coverage, and they are one of the better defenses in the league with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed being able to be on as their corners there. So I don't know. Do you feel better about Gabe Davis this week? I know he's been up and down.
No.
No? Yeah. Okay.
No. Through the first 10 weeks of the season, the Jets are allowing a league low 102.7 receiving yards a game to opposing wide receivers. They've allowed just a single touchdown to a wide receiver this season. That's 3 fewer than any other defense has given up to the position this year. this is a familiar opponent to Gabe Davis.
Mm-hmm.
He has not exceeded, or he has failed to exceed 5.5 fantasy points in all but one of his career games against the Jets dating back to 2020.
Oh my God.
7 games against the Jets in his career, it only exceeded 5 fantasy points once. So this is not like a good matchup. It's a matchup we've seen a million times before for Gabe Davis, and it hasn't been a good one. This, like you said, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, just the best cornerback duo in the league this year. And I mean, I said 102.7 receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers. And, a decent amount of those came while they were dealing with injuries. Like it with them in the lineups, this team shuts down the pass, shuts down opposing wide receivers, and an asset that's already as volatile as Gabe Davis. I'm not expecting that like any of that is going to be solved this week. No.
Yeah, there's just no chance. I want to put Gabe Davis in my lineup this week if I can afford to. And then on the other side of things for the Bills offense, it is their running back. So the Jets, one of the better run defense teams in the league as well, 73.3 run defense grade, which is 5th best. So James Cook, he's been good this year. Obviously, he had to fumble last week, which cost him some playing time. But with his touches, he was efficient. He's like you said, like Chris Godwin doesn't have the touchdown upside. James Cook doesn't really have that touchdown upside either. We saw it briefly early in the year where they gave him some goal to go touches, but other than that, there's really no opportunity there for him this year. It's been Latavius Murray taking a lot of those touches inside the 5-yard line. So James Cook, I don't know, pretty much on the fringes of that RB2, RB3 spot for me. How about you?
Yeah, like what James Cook needs is like a breakaway run. I think last week it was just such a cringeworthy day for James Cook, despite the fact that he looked incredible, but the ball security was 100% an issue. And for this team, as soon, I don't know who was necessarily involved in the benching of James Cook, whether it was Ken Dorsey or whether that was Sean McDermott or like what went into that. But basically the team acknowledged very loudly with him on the sideline that they need him to hold on to the ball. He came back in, and then you saw another instance where he fumbled. He happened to pick it back up. It bounced just perfectly into his arm so he could keep running.
So lucky. Yeah.
It was the luckiest, like that would have 100% been another turnover. There was another handoff, a botched handoff between him and Josh Allen. It was definitely Josh Allen's fault. He just like let go of the ball before it was even in range for James Cook. But like just in general, knowing how much a problem these turnovers have been and knowing the matchup, I don't know what to expect with James Cook. The only thing that I'm kind of holding on to with James Cook is, like a Raheem Mostert, like a Devin Achane. Oh my God, never gonna get used to that. Like those kind of explosive players, it doesn't necessarily take a ton of volume for them to reach the kind of yardage potential. But yeah, given the lack of usage in the red zone and knowing that this just isn't necessarily a great matchup for anybody anywhere around, not loving it. James Cook, their first go around in the season, had 12 carries, 46 rushing yards. Like I think generally speaking, you're probably expecting RB2, RB3 production.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly where I'm at with him. And it is a good defense. Like if it was a better matchup this week, if it was like against a Carolina or a New York Giants or something like that, you'd feel a lot better about him. But the Jets, they definitely have a stronger defense. So it makes it harder to trust James Cook this week, but there could potentially be better weeks to trust him kind of going forward here. So let's go to Sunday Night Football. It is the Pasternaut-led Minnesota Vikings taking on Russell Wilson's Denver Broncos, and kind of a matchup that I feel okay about both quarterbacks this week. And I guess starting with Russell Wilson, I mean, the Broncos offensive line has been fine. They've been a decent pass blocking unit. The Vikings defensive line, though, really hasn't been great. Like Danielle Hunter's got the sacks, but as far as generating pressures go, they're the second worst defensive line in the league at generating pressure. They've earned a 53.6 pass rush grade as well, which is the second worst mark this season, that defensive line. And Russell Wilson, when kept clean, has been really good. He's thrown 18 touchdown passes from a clean pocket, which is just one fewer than the league leaders, Tua Tagovailoa and Josh Allen. He's also earned a 5.3% big time throw rate from a clean pocket, which is a top 10 mark among quarterbacks. 80.3% adjusted completion rate when he isn't pressured, third best among quarterbacks. Russell Wilson's been solid. I in the right matchup. So I feel pretty good about him. Plus, he made that ridiculous throw to Courtland Sutton last week, which is just one of the more amazing plays that we've seen this year. So I feel okay about Russell Wilson this week. Am I crazy to trust him?
No, I think Russell Wilson, hasn't necessarily had like a super high ceiling this year, but his floor has actually been, kind of fine. I mean, he's had, I think all but three of his matchups this year, I believe, have been finishes inside the top 12. Like, you'll take that for a guy it might just very well be on waivers at this point. Courtland Sutton, I think, has looked fantastic too. Like, it kind of came out of left field. He's on pace for 13 touchdowns this year, despite being on pace for only around like 800 receiving yards. But he has been kind of this go-to option in the red zone, and he's been a pretty clutch one at that, as we kind of got on full display last week with that insane touchdown grab in the end zone. The toe drag swag, just absolutely unbeatable there. But I think, Russell Wilson, he is a fine matchup. He's going to make some boneheaded decisions, which I think we've seen. But generally speaking, he's got a good surrounding cast. You love Javonte Williams. You love the work he's been getting in. And I think that's kind of where this ends. But I will say I'm starting to reach the point where I have a lot more trust in Courtland Sutton than I do Jerry Jeudy. And I did not think that would be the case heading into 2023.
Yeah, I did. I'm with you. I was not on that either. I thought Jerry Jeudy could potentially have one of his better years, and it's kind of been the opposite. He has not been great this year. And Courtland Sutton
is the wide receiver 18 on the year.
Unreal. Yeah, he's been excellent. And like you said, those end zone targets have been a big help for that. But really looking good. So I think you continue to roll with Courtland Sutton for the most part if you've already been starting him. And then I mean, it was nice too to see Marvin Mims get more playing time this past week as well. 76% route participation, which is the highest by far for him of the season, with Brandon Johnson on injured reserve as well. So nice to see him. He hasn't delivered necessarily as far as production goes, but there's one of those deep league plays if you're looking for maybe a big play to kind of come out of nowhere. Marvin Mims.
The thing is, like, the more Sean Payton talks about needing to get Marvin Mims involved, the less involved we see. Like,
it's so weird.
He has gone 3 of the last 4 weeks without a single catch. He's had 1 reception for 0 receiving yards over the last 4 weeks. He has had some very weirdly placed like runarounds and sweeps, like, that just didn't make a ton of sense, like sending them back several yards just to gain a couple, and it made no sense at the time, and they weren't successful plays anyway. So I don't really understand what they're doing with Marvin Mims. You love to see the participation, but man, that target rate, especially given the high participation, is a bit concerning for me.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not something that most leagues are banking on at all, because below, I think he's averaging 5% target rate over the last 3 games for him. So it's really, really poor.
If you paced out his last 5 games over the course of a 17-game season, he would be on pace for 17 receiving yards and 0 touchdowns.
Oh my God, that's gross.
And negative 47 rushing yards. That's a fun stat.
Yeah, he's hurting. He's giving you negative points there, basically on a 17-game season. So, all right, let's go to, because I don't think that there was much more here for the Denver. Yeah, we touched on Javonte Williams. He's been excellent as far as volume goes. So how about on the Minnesota side of things? I mentioned liking Josh Dobbs this week. Broncos giving up the seventh most touchdown or most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and Josh Dobbs since coming to Minnesota has been better than he was even in Arizona. So feel pretty good about him, and a few other options that we have here in Minnesota, even Ty Chandler. So Ty Chandler could be without Alexander Mattison this week, and haven't liked Alexander Mattison. Obviously, he's been very ineffective for the most part this season. So could be Ty Chandler's chance to kind of shine here and maybe win some more snaps going forward when Alexander Mattison recovers from the concussion.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit cooler on the Vikings offense in general than you are right now.
Okay.
So Josh Dobbs, just to be clear, he has been amazing. Over the last 2 weeks, 110 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, that has been back-to-back weeks as a top 5 fantasy quarterback on a brand new team that he barely has ever played with. Like that, you cannot deny that is absolutely incredible. But the Broncos, like this defense, despite the fact that on the season they've allowed some decent fantasy production to opposing quarterbacks, I'm a little bit worried about the way that they've been able to generate turnovers in these past couple of weeks over the last they've logged an interception in each of their last 6 games. And that's including games with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, who I know, yes, turning the ball over, but in that same span, like Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Love, Josh Allen, they've held all of them to a total of 4 passing touchdowns and 225 passing yards over the last 3 weeks. I think they might be surging just a little bit, and it seems like this defense is kind of vibing, and they're generating those turnovers, which I think could be maybe a spot of weakness here headed into week 3. I know it's another week, of practice with the team and all that jazz, but I don't know. There's something about this Denver Broncos defense that, like, Pat Surtain and company, they feel like they're vibing.
Yeah, Pat Surtain's been great. Yeah, I guess for me, like, I just not loving the rest of the group. I mean, Justin Simmons has been really good, but they've definitely been
It's
playing
not
better lately.
like they haven't been like a sexy defense, but
Yeah.
they've been generating turnovers, which I think, I'm expecting the other foot to drop here for this offense. And I think that this could be one of those trap situations. I don't know though. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they did not play well up against this defense. And to be fair, those are 2 quarterbacks that have had ups and downs throughout their 2023 seasons, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, there's definitely some stuff to like there for the Denver defense, but yeah, Justin Jefferson could potentially be back again this week, which was one of the other reasons that I did like Josh Dobbs as well, getting in that true elite wide receiver there. Jordan Addison's been really solid. TJ Hawkinson as well. I like the potential for this Minnesota offense, I guess for me, and just considering Josh Dobbs has been doing a nice job at, like you said, new on the team, but has performed pretty well, all things considered. So it'll be a fun one to watch, I think, on Sunday Night Football. Could be one of the better games, I think, it's surprisingly, even though it doesn't necessarily seem like it might be on paper. But anybody else for Minnesota for you this week?
No, I think that about covers it. I do think you're right, though. Like, name value, not the sexiest game on the slate this week, but I do think it could sneaky be a pretty entertaining matchup for both of these teams.
Yeah, could be a fun one, I think, for Sunday Night Football. So looking forward to it. Last game of the week here, and it was the last game of last season as well. It's a Super Bowl rematch between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Kate, this should be another one of those fun games. Where do you want to go first with this matchup?
Ooh, I think the Eagles probably a pretty straightforward matchup, so we can get them out of the way. I think the Chiefs are way more interesting at this point in the season. I mean, the Chiefs, not a great defensive matchup, ranked top 10 against every single position in the league this year for fantasy production. They've just been probably one of the most underrated defenses in the league, but you have the Eagles who, pretty good offense. So I trust them to take it on wholeheartedly. And to the point of the Chiefs, like, haven't necessarily faced the toughest stretch of their schedule to this point in the season. So we might see those numbers fluctuate a little bit just based on the strength of the opponent. Now the Eagles, you're starting Jalen Hurts, you're starting DeAndre Swift, and you are starting AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, especially considering the absence of Dallas Goedert. But I mean, that's it, right? Like, it doesn't matter what opponent you're going up against, like, especially this week. And I know I've talked about the volatility of Devonta Smith in the past. You're throwing that out the window with Dallas Goedert out of the mix. Like, he is a smash play. There are no other questions that I have about this Eagles offense, which is so nice. Just set it and forget it.
Yeah, no, yeah, you said it. And yeah, you're not putting Jack Stoll in your lineup here.
No, it's like an easy bake oven. You just set the timer and you let it cook.
Yeah, I'm with you. And look, the Chiefs, they did a nice job against the Miami offense a couple weeks ago. But again, we trust this Eagles offense to be productive either way. So I don't think you're letting any of those guys leave your lineup, but then you're also not going anywhere beyond those starters either. So let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs offense here. And I mean,
starter
Mahomes,
sit Patrick Mahomes.
Sorry, starter sits. Yeah, I wonder. Let me see. Probably QB1 for me this week against the Eagles, and what should be, I would think, like a high scoring game, right? Like, especially with the Eagles, who are giving up third most fantasy points to quarterbacks too. Mahomes coming off a nice rest here and the bye week. He should be good to go. And I also kind of like Rashee Rice again this week. He just continues to kind of intrigue, right? He's working against zone coverage again. Third most fantasy points per route run against zone this year. Strong target rates against both man and zone. Snap share slowly on the rise as well. He's really the lone Chiefs wide receiver that I would be considering this week. And I mean, Travis Kelce, obviously we're starting. I don't know if Taylor Swift is going to be in the house for this one or not, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not benching Travis Kelce based on Taylor Swift appearance or not. So yeah, anybody else on Kansas City's offense that is worth discussing for you?
No, I think for me, I think the biggest question for me right now is probably Pacheco. Like, I don't see this being a sweet spot. This is not a matchup where I'm looking to trust him. I think Pacheco's probably going to end up somewhere around like RB35 in my rankings this week, which is not necessarily a matchup that you're excited about. Looking to avoid him at pretty much all costs. But yeah, back to the well on Rashee Rice. He continues to impress with all that yards after the catch ability. His ability to find these soft spots against zone has been just so impressive. He just feels like he's got this knack and this vibe with Patrick Mahomes, which you love. Maybe this is like the easiest matchup of the week. Like, there's not a lot to get cute with. We know who these teams are, which is so nice.
It is, yeah, it's definitely nice. And yeah, not the best matchup for Pacheco. Eagles giving up the fewest points, fantasy points per game to the running back position. It was interesting, at least with Pacheco. He did see a season high snap share last week, 70% and like 76% of the rush attempts in a close game against Miami. So I'd be keeping an eye to see if that becomes a trend here for him. That would be the one kind of redeeming factor for me, is if his volume jumps up like it did this past week. So, or this past game in week 9. But yeah, other than that, I think you pretty much nailed it. There is nobody else kind of worth considering. So with that being said, that is going to wrap up our week 11 preview episode. So again, thank you everybody for listening or watching on YouTube. Hopefully, again, it helps get those lineups set. Again, crunch time here for fantasy, for the fantasy season. We're nearing the fantasy playoffs. So any questions and stuff like that, you can shout them in the YouTube comments as well. I always check in there to see if there's any start sit questions or anything like that. But Kate, a big thank you to you as well for going through it all with me. It was a pleasure, but please let everybody know what else you can have up on pff.com this week.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I have the rushes report. I've got the panic or antic column. Both of those are live over at pff.com. And of course, every Friday in case of emergency waiver wire ads, just in case. You never know when you might find yourself in need due to last second injuries. So combing the waiver wires, finding some players that might be available in your leagues that could help you out in a pinch.
Awesome. Yeah, check all that out. I got the IDP fantasy report up on PFF.com, IDP rankings, wide receiver man zone coverage report, offensive line, defensive line matchups to target and avoid will be up Friday morning. But yeah, other than that, enjoy Thursday night football, everybody. It should be a good one this week. No need to find alternative watch options this time, I hope. So good luck in week 11. And until next time, peace out.